The following video is an illustration of the task in hand. If you prefer to have us do the job, please contact Emma or Rob at Amazon Cars. Today it's time to build up Craig's B18 engine. This comes out of his 1967 123 GT. So in other words, we're building it up to standard road spec. It's going to get a D-cam shaft in it. Let's go. My first task is to clean the 10 threads into which the cylinder head bolts go. So, here we go. So that's the 10 cylinder head bolt holes all cleaned and jetted out. Now we're going to install the crankshaft. Now all our machining is done by those excellent people at Scholar Engines and then returned to me for building up of the engine. On the crankshaft we have here exactly what big end bearing size is required and what main bearing size is required. And we use graphited assembly lube when we put these in. That's the end bearing with its thrust faces, and the little tongue engages in the block. Not forgetting to put assembly grease onto the thrust faces of the number 5 bearing. On the top of this cap, it tells me it's number 1, and the arrow is pointing there. Number 2. And we set 130 Newton meters on our torque wrench. And check that it turns nicely. Good. Now we're going to balance up the reciprocating weights. So we weigh number 1, which is 710.7. Number 2, 705.5. Number 3, 707.2. And number 4, 709.8. Now we measure the pistons. 386.3. .386 dead. .386. 385.8. Sadly, we can't get the original equipment Marler pistons anymore, hence we go to the high quality forged pistons, which explains why their discrepancy between weights is very accurate, or very small. So, we arrange these in weight order: 385, 386, 386 and 386.3. And now we match them up with the opposite sides, opposite weights here. So the heaviest of the con rods was number 1, so we'll put the lightest piston with that. So that is number 1 piston. The lightest of the set is number 2, so we'll put the heaviest with that. So that makes this one number 2. And then these 2 pistons are the same weight, so they go there and there. Now we see which one is the lightest combination. $10.96.4. $10.91.7. $10.93.2. $10.95.7. So number 2 is our lightest. So we grind metal off the con rod until we reach the same weight, combination weight as that. So, what we've done, using a soft wheel, we've taken down the casting flash. See, there's number 2 with all its original castings visible on the edge. And we gently take that down with a soft wheel to reduce the weight until it matches number 2. Now initially, when Volvo built these engines, they were surprisingly accurate. Generally, the reciprocating weights were within a gram of each other anyway, unlike the Kent Ford motor, which was way off a gram reciprocating weights. These were very accurate. So let's just check those now. We have 1091.7, 1091.7, 1091.6, 1091.5. I'm happy with that. This is a road-going engine. If this was a motorsport engine, we would actually make sure they were all within 0.1 of each other. So that's our reciprocating weights all done. Next task is to assemble the piston and con rod and put on its rings. Okay, to assemble the pistons, we're going to put the marking on the piston X there towards the marked number on each con rod. So first of all, in goes one of the circlips. We have a special technical tool here, which is a little cutout there to assist this, but it's always a bit of a devil of a task. So, feed in the wire into one of the grooves, and then carefully, there it goes, look at that. Pop it over and set it to with your thumbnail. There it is, just check that it's all seated neatly, and it has. So, we go through and do that. go. Now, in order to assemble these easily, we're going to pop them into the oven at 90 degrees. And by warming up both the piston and the rod, the gudgeon pin will drop in nice and easily. Right, so now we assemble the piston to the comm rod. So out it comes from the oven. A light spray of WD, which is on that side. Mark facing towards me, number facing towards me. And in it slides. There's number 4. Next, in go the circlips. Okay, shut down. Let them cool off. Okay, we're going to pop the circlips to secure the gudgeon pins. Whilst we're doing that, we're just going to warm up the timing gear in the oven for the same reason. By warming it up, it's going to be a lot easier to fit onto the camshaft and crankshaft. So these go into the oven about 90 degrees. Largely the same trick. Located in the groove. And then just snap it home. There we go, that's number 1. Okay, next is to fit the piston rings. What we have working from the bottom up: scraper, oil control and a top scraper. The middle ring, and you can tell which way is up because it will generally almost always have a marking on the upper surface. And the top ring, again a marking on the upper surface. You can tell this is the top ring because it has a chamfer on the internal diameter. That means it's the top ring. Often the mid ring, although this is square section, will have a cutout on the outer diameter, but not in this case. So we grab our piston, we mark it into thirds around the perimeter. So 120 degrees. 1, 2, 3. And this is where we're going to aim for all our piston ring gaps to line up. So oil control ring there, mid ring there, top ring there. In this case, our ring is held together by a piece of wire here. So you just stretch it a little bit and on it goes. There we go, the opening at our mark. Then, staggering by about, a quarter of a turn, on goes the scraper ring. And staggering the gap again, on the other side, the bottom control ring goes on. Just like that. Okay. Next, making sure you've got it the correct way up. So there's an N sitting there, so that's the top side. Stretch it over the piston and let go a little bit too early. There it goes into the mid groove, and that's going to be at that point. Finally, top ring. There we go. So, that gap there, mid-ring gap is now there, and the top ring gap is there. Now we fit the big end bearings. The size of these bearings was also given to us by Scholar on their job ticket. And in go the pistons next. So we rotate so that numbers 1 and 4 are at bottom dead centre. A nice squelch of WD-40 around the bores just to help everything slide in neatly. So, number one piston. The oil filter is this side, just here. The number on the con rod must point to the oil filter. So there's the number, there's the oil filter. This piston goes in like that. We give it a nice generous spray of WD on the rings. Check them once more that they are all at 120 degrees to each other. On with the ring compressor. Number one marking. Engage, level off the spring compressor. Tighten it up neatly. And in it goes. Just pushing that bearing back into position. Some lube. Number one, oil filter. Number four, oil filter. Now, there's usually a couple of pain marks on this to make it into a self-locking nut. Make sure those are uppermost. Punch mark, punch mark. Punch mark, punch mark. Punch marks. Punch marks. Now our torque wrench is set to 60 Newton meters. And rotate to bring number 1, 2 and 3 to bottom dead centre. And 60 Newton meters. Next is the oil pump, so let's go and fetch that. Nice new Volvo oil pump every time. We do sometimes use steel oil pumps in competition engines. On with the oil seal. A dab of oil to ease it on. And so the long horizontal goes into the pump. Notice the rings at the bottom. And engage the oil pipe. And whilst pressing the oil pipe in, jiddle the pump in. There you go. In with the 5/16 bolts. And that's the oil pump fitted. Now we're in with the camshaft. Keep it cool. Here's our camshaft. Clean off the bearing surfaces with brake cleaner or something similar. And then a nice smear of assembly lube. And in we go. Up. In with your kit. You'll also have the new ring, which is marginally thicker than the securing plate. On goes the ring. Clean up the woodruff key. And tap it home. On goes the plate. A touch of the earlier engines had lock tabs on these bolts, but the later ones it got deleted. And 1/4 inch bolts are secured to 10 Newton meters. There's a timing mark on that tooth there.
Down a bit. Mm-hmm.
And the cam nut goes on with 150 Newton meters. and just double check that the 2 timing marks are still in the right place. Now we pop in the dizzy drive. We just turn this through 180 degrees. So, if you hold the dizzy drive such that the slot is offset to the right and straight up and down, like that, grip it, gently insert it, now pressing it down, there it goes, it's now engaged with the oil pump. So just wind it round to make sure we've got it in the right place. And it's effectively pointing at 10 o'clock now, which is correct. That's where I want it. Just pop on a temporary clamp to stop it from falling out. And does anyone know what I did with the oil spray bar? There. Oil spray bar. The hole is just offset from that top flat. It's pointing out this way. Air jet. Make sure you can feel the output jet on your finger. I built an engine for a customer some years ago, and it had silicon sealant and PTFE tape fouling up the middle and no oil spray at all. This is a brass in steel fitting, so you do not need any form of PTFE tape, silicon sealant, or anything else. You just turn it round till it starts to meet some resistance, and then the back edge lies parallel with the timing cover. So just a bit more than that. There we go, like that. So now the spray is pointing straight into the middle of the timing gear. Timing gear. Okay, shut down. Now the timing covers and the rear crank seal. We always use L-ring gaskets. We found these to be consistently reliable. Taking the timing cover gasket, see that this timing cover has been modified to have a modern neoprene seal fitted. To hold the gasket in place, we just put some dobs of grease.
Suddenly there was a bang from somewhere and a small scream. Thomas ran into the bedroom and found Annika sitting up. I saw a flash, said Annika. Up there. She pointed to the sky. Lightning? Maybe. But then there was a noise as well, as if something was falling off.
And then just very loosely
Opened the door to the cabin and looked up and down the pathway. He thought he could hear a faint noise,
locate the timing cover.
but the sound was soon gone.
Out of the oven, we get the crankshaft collar.
It was shortly after 11 o'clock when Thomas arrived home. He knocked on the front door, but there was no answer.
Make sure you've checked that there is no
Everything was silent.
groove here by running your finger over it. If you can't, if it feels absolutely smooth, we're happy.
For once, Thomas's
If it doesn't feel absolutely smooth, replace it. Fit a new one.
big Norman sparks a punch on the nose.
Grease on the internal and external surfaces. Our wood rough cree is at the top to match that.
I was wondering if your brother was available. I'm sorry, Mr. Foley. He's down at the terrace. I'll ask him to call him, shall I? Yes.
That collar has now accurately located the timing cover so we can pop the rest of the bolts in. And now the rear seal. Quick smidging of grease. You'll notice that the surface has been polished, so when we send it to Scholar, one of our instructions is polish the rear seal surface so we don't have any grooves. Once again, we have the late style neoprene seal, so we modify the original housings to take a neoprene rather than the original felt. And once more, we put some splodges of grease on to locate the gasket. This one's a lot trickier to fit. Yes, it is. Paranoid about a spring moving out there.
I know.
Another reason to go to Fox. Okay. And then with the bolts with their slim washers. Tapping home on the outside of the race with a suitable drift, and a slurp of grease on the spigot bearing. Fit the dust cover. spring clip home. Check that it's seated nicely, which it has. On with the crankshaft pulley. The torque is 80 Newton meters for this. Trim back the timing cover tabs, there and there. Making sure you don't drop them into the engine. And the same at the rear crank seal. The L-ring gaskets are usually in 3 bits. The text goes towards the top of the engine. And the drain is at the back of the engine, and that then allows all your holes to match up. On the B18 engine, this baffle here extends too far aft, so with the stronger Volvo oil pump webbing here, the two foul like that. So you can't fit it like that, so you have to relieve a little cutout here. We have a template for this. So we offer that template up, and that's where we need our little cutout. So our pilot hole. And then I'll use an angle cutter just to cut that little section out. The final bit of the bottom end build is to put the sump on. So we have now relieved the B18 sump for the later type oil pump there. and torque it up to 21 Newton meters because these are 5/16 bolts. Before the head goes on, we're going to put a lick of paint on the block. Here we go. Now it's time for the water pump. One of the few places we actually do use a proprietary sealant. This is Hylamar universal jointing compound we're using here, and a quick spray on each side. Nice new water pump. They're 5/16 bolts, so that makes it 21 Newton meters on your torque wrench. And now we install the followers. Naturally, one always uses a brand new set of followers for every new camshaft. Nice bit of assembly lube. Not forgetting the 2 water pump seals that are matched to the cylinder head gasket thickness. We then use a pair of guide bolts and the gasket, looking for where the text is stamped, because that's the top side. So there's the text, so that's the top. And on with the head. Out with the guide bolts. Following the specs given with your cylinder head gasket set, we start off at 40 Newton meters, go to 80 and finish at 90. And the sequence is middle alternating outboard. In with the push rods. Next is the valve top seals. They're not genuinely a valve stem seal, they are simply a rubber that goes on top of the valve. Like that, and guides the oil away from the stem. Locate the rocker gear and push all the rockers down onto their push rods. Because we've skimmed the head, we'll just slacken off the valve adjustment a turn. And secure the rocker shaft. These are 5/16 bolts, so you can just nip them down to 21 Newton meters. Turn the engine around a couple of times, just to get everything seated down nicely. And adjust the valves. Now, in go the manifold studs. And I use two 5/16 nuts to nip down the stud. So we put two on, tighten them up nicely, and then when the inboard nut lets go like that, we're happy. And on with the plate that covers the oil cooler outlet. Now, the manifold locating rings. Some copper slip. Manifold gasket, once again, putting the text on the outside surface. On goes the manifold with its lovely new downpipe studs. On the Amazon, this points approximately to the cylinder head bolt. And finally, the heater transfer pipe. A little bit of silicone grease, water pump, a touch where the O-ring goes, perch the O-ring on the very end of the heater transfer pipe. Offer it up. And press home. So that's our standard B18 engine rebuild. Of course, there's lots of other things you can do to upgrade the engine. The bottom end would include going slightly more accurate on the piston, the reciprocating weights, and a high lift camshaft like either one of our two favourite Iski camshafts. Then, having gone to that point to raise the red line, you also need to fit tubular push rods so that they don't flex, and a gas-flowed cylinder head to allow the gases to go better. Along with that gas-flowed head, you then go to separate inlet and exhaust manifold. The exhaust manifold, we would usually go to a 4:1, manifold, because that happens to mate very nicely to the Simon's 2-inch sports exhaust system. But of course, if mid-range torque is what you're all about, then it should be a 4x2x1 exhaust. That's it. We're ready to load the engine into the GT now. Thank you.